record. Good morning, dearest friends. Welcome. It is Thursday, the 20th, Chaf Hey Tishrei. We're deep into Tishrei, and 1 month since the creation of the world began. And here we're studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently, Mesechah Shabbos, the 19th chapter, Kuf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Broadly speaking, we are discussing the intersection, the overlap of the laws of circumcision and Shabbos. We are on a little tangent that discusses the halacha of viability, or how we view both humans and human babies, as well as animal babies, as awkward as the juxtaposition is, before living out past either 30 days or 8 days. We noted there are varying opinions in the Mishnah and the Gemara. And we're actually in the middle of a story which had not to do with humans, but had to do with shechita of an animal that didn't yet make it past this wait and see probationary phase, the first 8 days of the child's life. The story was, we'll see soon who they were. I'm drawing a blank. Was there Rav Huna or others who were hosted for a dinner, and they were served a egla mishulash, which we spent our last few minutes trying to figure out what that is. We looked at a Tosfot and Gittin. We looked at the Chumash, which in the bris bein habsarim, the covenant between Abraham and Hashem, where it also talks about an egla mishulashes. We noted different commentaries having different interpretations. Ultimately, in our Gemara, we're compelled to stick with a pshat that is in the 7-day range. So obviously not a third through development, maybe a third born, or maybe just a robust, healthy, delicious.
Rabbi?
Yes, Professor.
If there are different possible interpretations of this combination of words and different opinion, isn't its usage and meaning in this Gemara a decisive argument for changing its translation in other places? That is,
Yes.
in other places we are looking for the context, for other considerations, but here the ambiguity is resolved by the discussion following the dinner.
Yes, so much so. Again, it doesn't fully resolve the question, but it is certainly brought as a support to the point that what we studied yesterday was a text, a Tosafot on Gemara and Gittin. And the Gemara in Gittin tries to compare and contrast and uses our Gemara as a possible support, but also contrast. And the reason why it needs to be so is because, well, let me just say like this. My suspicion is that there are going to ultimately have to be multiple interpretations, because when you lay out or you try to overlay all the different usages of that phrase or related phraseology, they almost cannot all have a single interpretation, because to qualify as an offering, it would have to be older than in infancy, while in our case, it must be in infancy. And so there is going to be some variation in the different meanings of the word based on context. But yet, this Gemara is an important source. And in our Gemara, I'll just say more than this, the commentaries don't really argue about what it means in our Gemara, because there aren't many options. But it is a good insight into the other Gemaras as well. So let's
Rabbi,
yes.
isn't it acceptable to say that words have different meanings based on context?
Certainly that is the case, but ideally it would be nice if we could try to find a common meaning. If you're going to use the exact same, not very typical phrase, the first attempt would be to try to say it all has a single meaning. And if we overlay all the different usages, that should be evidence of what it is. Alternatively, it means a really nice cut, or a really nice meat. And the reason why that's the meaning, well, maybe there are multiple contexts where that might be used. So again, I'm being a little bit non-committal, but we're compelled to conclude that there are different interpretations based on different contexts. But I thought it was the reason why I like that little Gemara, that little line, is because it's not so broad that it's overwhelming, and it's a nice insight into how you might have a biblical context and two Talmudic contexts, and different usages might point to different interpretations. And so that's why I enjoyed going down that rabbit hole, or as Rebbe would say, why I opened up that very small can of worms. Now give me one last moment. Excuse me.
You have a perfect example, Rabbi. If we're talking about fishing, a can of worms means one thing, and here it means something else.
But it's inspired by the same imagery. One is just conceptual and one is literal. But yeah, that's actually a very good, Alon. That's a good instance where, let's say today, Rebberal, can of worms, still we can trace a line between can of worms and probably somebody on a fishing boat who opened up the can of worms and now they're wiggling all over. But maybe as time will pass, there'll be a society that is entirely unfamiliar with the can of worms, and yet they'll use it, and it could evolve to the point where it'll be much harder to figure out what is going on.
It's just like today we use the term dial a phone, but most people, the younger people, don't even realize what that means.
Yeah, and there are others. There's actually a whole series of phrases that are deeply entrenched in our language that come from, I don't know, horse riding or other facets of times past that are entirely irrelevant to, or entirely hard to figure out, because the ideas are so obsolete or not present in our present day world. So yeah, but let's try to get up. Oh, that's why I'm logged out. Hang on, bear with me. Hold on. All right, our book is a little bit behind. Let's get us back into the. So again, our general question was: does everybody agree that an animal that is not yet 8 days is presumed to be a neifel until proven otherwise? Thus, if you shech the animal prematurely, is it considered a treifa or not? Just like we had a question about, God forbid, a young baby who's taken in an accident, is that the same as the baby who just passes or not? And that was where we said that there is a nafkamina. Pardon me. Now I want to get to the story, which I'm actually still a good. I said 135, but we're already in 136, so I misspoke. Here is the story. Okay, so the Gemara says, a child, God forbid, who passes within 30 days, but not because of his condition, but rather because of an accident or some outside force. Based on our reading of the Gemara, it would sound like Divrei Akol Chayu. Everybody would agree that this individual is considered to be, this child is considered to be alive, which would be a perfect analog for a baby. For a young animal that's shechted on the seventh day. And we would imagine that everybody would agree that a young animal shechted, slaughtered on day 7 or 6 or 5 or 4, because the thing that terminated the baby's life, the young animal's life, was not its lack of vitality or viability, but because of a act of taking its life, you would think that it would be okay. But we have an instance where an animal was served after being shechted on the 7th day, and the rabbis basically told their host, I'm sorry, we cannot eat this. Let's read the story again. Rav Papa v'Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yeshua. Iklu b'reid Rav Idi bar Oven. So the son of Rav Idi bar Oven hosted Rav Papa and Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yeshua, two great scholars, contemporaries, and he wanted to make the best delicacy. So he told his staff, to prepare the very best item on the menu. And so they made an egla tilta b'yamama deshiva. They prepared this delicious egla tilta b'yamama deshiva on the 7th day of this egla tilta's life. What is an egla tilta? So we spent a long time yesterday, but bottom line, it probably means a robust, hardy, maybe third born or something to that effect. And they told him, eat your tachisule ad l'orta. If had you waited, havachlina mine, we'd be allowed to eat it. Hashta, but based on how you prepared it, lo yachlina mine, we are unable to consume this delicacy that you prepared for us. Rashi, havachlina mine, the mixas hayam kikule. Although at nightfall, this animal, this baby, this young animal would only be 7 days and a fraction. In halacha, in many contexts, and apparently here too, we say mikzat hayom kikulo, a fraction of a day is considered as if you've experienced the entire day. So before we continue, let's see if there are any other commentaries who will weigh in over here. Hold on, bear with me. Hold on. Oh, yeah, this is another commentary that goes through the whole egla tilta debate. All right. Hold on, I have one more thing. Halacha. Let's just see what the Shulchan Aruch says real fast. Although admittedly we're in the middle of a conversation. Behema sheyodem yedua shekolei chadash. An animal that's born and you know that it came to term. Tes chadash legasa heladaka muter miyad b'yam shenoila, that it's impermissible to be shechted right away when born. V'leichashinon shem nisrasku evarav mechevle halei, that we're not concerned that there is an internal injury. But if the animal is possibly premature, so then the Shulchan Aruch paskins that the whole wait and see, the whole 30 days, and it's going to be based on the Gemara, which we have yet to learn, or we're beginning to learn, which is that this whole wait and see is only if you're not sure if the baby is born to term, as I'm sure there's different commentaries we'll discuss. We'll do one more thing. The Rambam says differently. And again, our Gemara, we still are going to see different sides, but just the Rambam, Mishnah Torah. If you eat an olive size of flesh of an animal that didn't live to Torah, you want
to get it?
I'm sorry, Dr. Hammer?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. If you eat from a shechted animal, from an afel, it's considered an avela. The asr lechom min habehema shenolda avel shemini. One is prohibited to eat from an animal until its 8th day. Shekol shaleisha shemina yamim. Behema is an afel. By an animal for 8 days, it's considered an afel. Ve'ein like an all, but there's no machas. But here, the same caveat as the Shulchan Aruch. But if you know that it actually was to term, so actually I was wrong. The Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch both agree. So there appears to be a consensus that ultimately, based on our Gemara, we're going to see that the waiting and seeing is only if we are uncertain about the viability of the Ella. So now we need to revise our statement. When it up and die, when it passed, just because its vitality ran out, it stops to living. Everybody agrees that it's considered a mace. Where is there an machloikes? If a act outside of just the natural cessation of life, so then there's a machloikes. Marsav meso. One opinion says that animal is still considered a mace. Marsav chayav. The other opinion says that we presume the person to be alive. So based on this story, we need to revise our understanding of the machloikes of the Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, that ultimately not everyone agrees that if the animal just dies, it was considered an afel. Machloikes is if it was killed or something happened to take its life. Another story that's going to talk about Dr. Stamler's question that he asked us yesterday. And that Dr. Stamler sent me a link yesterday, and I said yesterday I was not qualified to weigh in. But today we'll hopefully open up the Shulchan Aruch and take a look. Rav Dimi bar Yosef. Rav Dimi, son of Yosef, had a baby. Begoy or begav tlosin yemin shachiv. The baby, unfortunately, did not live through 30 days. The baby passed away within 30 days of birth. Yosef comes abel alovei. Rav Dimi bar Yosef was mourning. He lost a child. It's devastating, truly devastating. Shalom Neda. Amar le'avua. His father told him, you think you're entitled to be fed foods? Or actually, I don't know if this was a challenge or just a question. So you want to eat the foods that are fed to mourners? Amar le, so he told his father, Kim li be, yes, I do. Although usually a baby until 30 days is considered questionable viability, my baby, I know, was born to term. And therefore, I, says Rabbi Dimi bar Yosef, am mourning. Now let's read Rashi. The delicious foods that the Avel gets kabais lamechal. He's basically the father, according to Rashi, so I'll revise my interpretation. His father was being critical of him. You know, sometimes a person needs to be called out even in sensitive times, and apparently the father took upon himself the mantle of doing so. And he said, listen, you're mourning, that's unwarranted, because yesterday we asked the question, Dr. Stamler, you on with us? Yesterday we asked the question, actually Dr. Hammer asked the question, Dr. Stamler filled me in the blanks. So we asked the question, what if a baby, God forbid, passes before 30 days? Is there Avelos? So forget the halacha, let's see the Gemara. Here we have a story of a baby who didn't live 30 days. The father mourned, and his father, who was a great halachic authority, I think, tells him, hold on, how are you mourning? The baby didn't, unfortunately, live out of a time where his passing is evidence that the baby was never viable. And he answers, no. My son was viable because he lived out his 30 days. And therefore, I'm entitled to mourn. So, Paisvis. It's interesting. You see, Rashi, so our Gemara has the word Savor Nyasa. Savor Nyasa. It looks like Taisvis has a different word in his Gemara, not Sadik Vav Vav Reish, but Sadik Vav Dalid. And we can understand how these two words could get mixed up, because the Dalid and Reish, especially in a manuscript or handwritten, could be mixed up. But the word Sodniyasa sounds closer to Tzeda, which means food. So Rashi and Tosfos, I don't think, are arguing on the actual interpretation, but there's an interesting machlokes about what, or two versions of what the word is. We haven't done this in a while, but I hope you'll indulge me. There are manuscripts, and so if we want to take a look at the Munich manuscript from 1342, we might, if we're very good eyes, no, I don't think I'm supposed to do this. Here's the Mishnah.
Rabbi.
Hold on. Here. Rei derav. Dimi bar Yoisi. Is Yoled. Look at this. You see in the hand, you see this print? Again, yeah. I'm sorry if this is not up your alley, I apologize. But we got to do this. Let me just see if we can find it. Hold on. This is fascinating. Here we should be somewhere in this neighborhood here. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna go back for a second.
Actually, I see V'yochlo Ari is actually spelled without an aleph.
Yeah, I know, but I went up because I saw this. You see, Rav Papa, we said that there was a story of the two rabbis who visited. So we said Rav Papa, and it was Yeshua Bereid the Rav. Who are the people? Again, if this is not your deal, I'm sorry. Give me a moment. Rav Papa, Rav Huna Bereid the Rav Yeshua. So look here. V'ha. See, if I was trying to decipher this manuscript, it would have taken me a moment to realize that's an aleph. I would have thought it was v'hayu, but it's v'ha, Rav, Papa, Rav, Huna. You see this? There's a line through Yeshua.
Yeah.
And it says Huna, Rav Huna, Braid Rav Yeshua. So I don't know. I'm not a scholar of manuscripts, but I'm curious. I don't know if there's a different version or the copyist made a mistake, and so he was corrected. But what I will show you is that Huna is written in the cursive, the Ashkenazic cursive. You see that? Whereas this is written in the
Fancy.
I don't know what you call it, the copyist typeset. So that's very interesting. But now let's get back to the Gemara that we were doing.
Actually, he probably made a mistake, but you'd think that it would have been corrected.
No, so I don't think the copyist made a mistake. I think the owner edited his copy, or someone else edited the copy and corrected it.
It says Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, and I guess he just fought the Rav Yeshua and made a mistake. But essentially, how the Yeshuas are different.
Yehoshua, Rei the Rav Yeho, Shu.
We're assuming that's Yeshua, but it's not the same.
Right. Hold on, bear with me. I just want to go to our Gemara. Again, I know this is very, very zoomed in. It would probably be easier to read not zoomed in. Brei de Rav Dimi. Again, I'm just using my knowledge of the Gemara. I wouldn't. Brei de Rav Dimi Bar Yoi Si Yosef. I don't know if that's a pay. No, it's a samach. Is Yalid Hahu Yenuka. Again, it's two. I'm going to zoom out again just so I can read it. I'm sorry. Here, let's find it again. Could you imagine this? If you wanted to be a Talmud scholar, once upon a time, you had to actually be able to read this.
You need some kind of straight edge to help for sure.
Here. Brei de Rav Dimi Bar Yosi is Yoled. How are you? Is Yoled Hahu Yenuka U is Yoled. No, you see. Is Yalele Hahu Yenuka Uvegoy Tlosen Yomin Shachav. So here is Yal, you see, added it again, the same editor, which again could have been the original person, but with a different pen, but probably someone else. Vegoy Tlosen Yomin Shachav. No. What's that word? Sham. Anyways, it's I think that says shachav, yosei, or something. I don't know. Shah.
Could be. Right, that could be. Looks like the second letter is a mem, shin mem, doesn't it?
So this is a total. If you notice, this is a different girsa. Brei Rav Huna Bar Yosi Yisyolid Lei Hahu Yenuka Uvegoy Tlosin Yoimin.
Is that middle letter a mem or a?
I think it looks like a mem. I'm like kind of imposing what I know the Gemara is saying.
Right.
Maybe that's shachiv. I know. I think it's shin chaf yud veis shachiv. You say.
Oh, I see. It's a chaf and a yud.
He died.
Running into each other.
V'ka misabel alove, and he was mourning him. Amar lei. Vuha, that could be. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. But I guess what I hope the point that we made here is that studying the manuscripts can be incredibly fruitful. And just as we see Tosfos and Rashi point out one small variant, when you study all the manuscripts, there are additional insights that can be gleaned from this limud.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I'm troubled by something, which is why would he do it in what we would call a cruel way? He could have asked him the same question in a sensitive way. The guy Nebuch lost a child. Why are you saying you're doing this for the Shiva meal? I mean, I have trouble with that.
I don't know. What I can suppose is the only thing I'll say is that probably the father knew his son, and there probably were different conventions. In those days, you ripped the Band-Aid off as fast as possible. You got straight down to the point, and he said, son, you don't belong mourning. I know this is painful, but halachically, what you're doing is incorrect. And do you think you're going to get an extra meal out of this? We could, hold on, Rebel, you don't need to go back 1800 years ago. Think back to how we might have talked 50 years ago or 70 years ago. I'm sure
okay.
It would have been, son.
I'm okay until he brings up you want the meal. I'm okay with it.
I suspect that's a little bit of a
sarcasm. Yeah.
Meaning what you're doing is unwarranted. So what are you going to get from it? Some food? Again, admittedly very, what's the word? To the point, jarring. But on the contrary, if that's how they spoke, I'm glad we preserved it in the Talmud. So we get a little personality, get a little sense of the dynamic. It would be very disappointing if the whole Talmud was sanitized beyond style and flavor. But I gotta admit, I'm my curiosity is, I'm intrigued by the manuscript we just peeked at. But anyways,
it's also interesting to learn. It doesn't say food fed to mourners, delicacies.
Yeah. He's saying, like, what's your agenda? There's no halacha here. So are you looking out for those treats?
Yeah.
It's a very biting comment to tell someone who's obviously going through a lot of grief. But I think what we have to acknowledge is that there's a distinction between feelings of grief and rituals of mourning. The father doesn't say, why are you crying? He doesn't say, why are you sad? Of course he's sad. But why you're going through motions that are not appropriate in this moment. And his answer was a halachic defense, to the point where the Rambam Paskins, Reb Menachem and Dr. Hammer, if we're absolutely certain that the baby was born to term, then even on the very day of birth, you'd mourn. So let's take a look at the Rambam. Again, the Gemara is not entirely done, but in the spirit of mixing things up, here, Hanfolim, a stillborn or a baby that doesn't live through childbirth, which in law that's extended to 30 days. And so long as the baby didn't live 30 days, this is considered an nafel. Even if the baby is born on the 30th day, no mourning. However, if there's absolute certainty that this baby was Tisha Hadashim Gmorim, well then one can mourn. Indeed, this is what comes out of our Gemara. So I just want to point the Kesef Mishnah on the previous thing here says that based on our Gemara, Halesha, Sveika Hava. It would be a doubt if the baby is viable. So basically, why are we leaning to about Avelos? Because there is a doubt. There is a suffix. There is a suffix about the baby status. Avelos is the Rabbanon, and the law is that whenever there is a suffix, so we go Lekula. Bentisha Chadashon Shenoilad Mace. What about if a baby who went through full term but died, was really a stillborn, Uben Shmoina Shemes, as well as an 8-month term, meaning premature Shemes, Filu Achar Shleishim Yoim, Harez the Nefel Misaban Aleim the Misaskne Moim. Such a baby is considered a Nefel, and mourning isn't warranted, and many of the other absolute responsibilities of burial also do not apply in the letter of the law. They are buried, but some of the urgency and restrictions don't apply. Rebbe Nachem would note, the link he sent me describes that such babies receive a circumcision before Kivura. So that is that. Again, we're not totally done this discussion, but let's take a peek in the Shulchan Aruch, see if he says the same thing. Tinoik, kol shloishim yoim, yem shloishim echlal, a baby up to the 30th day, including the 30th day, and they pass, God forbid, ein misablin olav, mourning is not warranted. Afilu, so Dr. Hammer, we're addressing your question from yesterday in today's Gemara. Afilu gomru, Sarah v'tziparnav, even if the baby is fully formed. Nonetheless, warning is not halachically warranted. But beyond that, if the baby doesn't live, then you would mourn unless you are certain that this baby was actually premature to the point where he was not considered viable. But if we are absolutely certain that this baby has had a full pregnancy, and how could we be certain? The husband and wife were only intimate once, and we know what date that was. And then the baby was born 9 months later. Then we would mourn as our Gemara indicates. Then the Ramah points out an interesting case, which is not really our attention, but we'll read it. Actually, I don't know if this is the Ramah, but there's a footnote. Safek ben Tesla Rishon and ben Zayin La'achrin. After, God forbid, a woman is widowed, she's supposed to wait 3 months. One of the purposes is so we would have absolute certainty, the identity of a parent. Because if someone passes and you don't wait enough time, you'll not be certain if this woman becomes pregnant, if it's the new father, the old father. But suppose there is a scenario where we're not sure. They didn't follow this law. And as soon as her husband passed away, a month later, she gets married again. And we don't know if the baby is 9 months for the old father, the deceased, or a 7-month gestation for the second. They both have to mourn. So it's totally off topic, but I share that just because it's interesting. Maybe interesting is a funny word, but thought-provoking. Hold on, just give me another moment. Shach. All right. So there's some discussions here. You might not be surprised. All right, let's continue the Gemara now. Rav Ashi, Iklo Beit of Kano. Oh, it's possible that I was reading with you the wrong text. Give me one more. I'm sorry. There's 2 stories. Let's just make sure we weren't mixing them up. No, I didn't mix up. This is just look where can you see where my cursor is? In the older Gemara, this is that word that Rashi and Tosfos argue about. What was that word? Who remembers what it was?
Reish or Dalet.
In our Gemara, we said Savar Nisa or Tsuda Nisa. Here, I don't see a tzaddik. I see a taf and an aleph. Could that be a tzaddik? If that's a tzaddik, that letter is a resh. More like Rashi's version. I would not have figured that out. Now here, Rav Ashi Ikler Reb Kana. Isra Bey. Anyway, okay. So here's the next story. Rav Ashi Ikler Reb Kana. Isra Bey Milsa. A tragedy broke out. A tragedy that warranted mourning, and Rabbi Steinzalt says it means his child died. Chazia, the Yosef become a Sabal Alavei. Rav Ashi notices that Rav Kana is in mourning. Surely, don't you know that we follow Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel that says until 30 days the child is a nefel? When does Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel say that you wait 30 days? When you are in doubt, when you don't know the status of the baby. But in the event that you have certainty about the age or the gestation of the baby, you know that the baby had a full pregnancy, then mourning is warranted. And so we have two stories, including the great Rav Kana, and Rav Ashi apparently is accepting his claim, which is why and how this becomes cemented in Jewish law as the fact. Let's see the discussion that we referenced in passing. Now let's see it, because this is in the Shulchan Aruch. Now let's see it in its original source. Itmar. Meis b'sach shloishim, a baby dies within 30 days of birth. And she got married to somebody else. As Rashi says, the father never had a child. This baby is born after the father's death. And this baby should have exempted the mother from chalitza. We discussed this yesterday. Had the baby survived, and out of ignorance, she got married. She said, "Oh, my husband had a baby. I don't need to do the yibum," which we described as the Levirate ritual, or not the Levirate ritual. Yeah, the Levirate ritual where she marries her deceased husband's brother. So what do? What's the status of this marriage? What's the status of this couple?
Wow.
Oh, yes, doctor.
No, I just said.
Amar Ravina Mishmei de Rava. Im Eishes Yisrael, if Im Eishes Yisrael, if she's married to an Israelite, not a Kohen, Chiletzes. Rashi. Im Einai Kohen, Zeshin is Kachalite.
That makes sense because a Kohen can't marry a Grusha or a Chalitza. So I guess out of doubt they have to.
So the question is, what is the status? What is she to do? But I think the question is, what is the status of this marriage?
Rabbi?
Yes.
Could you remind what is the law of the Chalitza? We all know that if somebody dies and his widow is childless, she is obliged to have the levirate marriage. But what if they had a child, the child, let's say 5 years old, God forbid, dies, and then the husband dies? Is the widow still childless and obligated to the levirate marriage and chalitza, or the fact that she used to have a child absolves her?
I'm very sorry. I missed the last line. We're asking if a surviving child absolves her, or
No, if the couple was married and had a child, and the child died while the husband was alive, and then the husband dies, and the widow is
oh, so you're asking a good question. You're
in the
asking
moment.
if
What
the
happens to
husband
her?
and wife had children in their lifetime, but
Yes,
the only children did not survive.
right,
They survived babyhood, but they are no longer alive.
right.
So then does the woman still need to undergo chalitza? So again, off the top of my head, I believe she may have to undergo chalitza, unless those children had children. So if there are no surviving descendants, I believe that's the case, but I'm not.
Let me ask you a question. Doesn't make
Hold
any
on. I wouldn't
sense.
go to the bank with that, but I believe that is the case.
It doesn't make
Reverend
any
Nachman.
sense. It
Because
doesn't-
here we're talking about the baby was viable, even though it died. You know, if it wasn't within the 30 days, then she'd be off the hook.
I have an issue though. I mean, when you say that the child dies and then the father dies, at what point do we say, what about a 24-year-old that dies and then his father dies? At
Yeah.
what point do we stop?
Yeah, this is the question that
No,
I'm
so the
asking.
question-
I'm using 5-year-old rather than 22-year-old.
No, it's helpful.
Just the child dies outside the month deadline later.
Oh,
But here-
hold on. The
But here
child
we're
survived.
discussing whether 30,
Hold on.
30
I'm
days
sorry. Let me just
counts.
clarify. There's a couple. They have a child. The child's 5 years old.
Right,
Who dies first, the child or the father?
the child.
The child dies, then the father dies.
Right,
There's no surviving descendants of the father.
right.
So your question was, does the mother do chalitza? My answer is a flimsy yes, meaning I would want to refresh before giving a psak, but I believe that is the case. Now, the other question is, so hold on. The couple is married and the woman is pregnant. The husband dies. Does the husband have a surviving child or not? Answer, we don't know. When will we know? Well, when the
30 days
baby's born.
After the baby's born.
When the baby's born, kind of.
Plus
When the
30
baby
days,
is born,
30 days.
which is what the Gemara is saying.
hold on, but just let me
He died within 30
hold
days.
on. Let me just finish speaking because it might be, and then fill in the blanks if you don't mind. Just so the couple's married, the husband dies, the wife is pregnant. Does the woman have to do chalitza? The answer is we don't know. We need to wait and see. Wait and see what? Baby's born. Now what? So you would think that the wife can now go ahead and get remarried without chalitza and yibum. No, we need
She
to
has
see.
to wait 30 days.
Exactly. We need to wait to make sure that this baby is viable. Why? Because God forbid, if this baby passes within 30 days, in the eyes of Jewish law, the baby really never was born a surviving, viable baby. Therefore, there was never a moment in the woman's life where she didn't need chalitza. The moment the child lives, is born, survives to the point of viability, at that moment, the buzzer rings. The woman is now not bound by chalitza at all.
Rabbi, what about if
Therefore, she can get remarried. Now, the
Rabbi.
question becomes, hold on. The question becomes, what if the baby dies within 30 days? Are you certain that the woman needs to do chalitza? Or would it depend on the different opinions on at what point do we become certain that the baby is alive or not? That is the question our Gemara is answering. And because we have a complex scenario where the woman went ahead and got remarried, not realizing, it's a little more sticky. Because now, are we going to tell her to leave the marriage? Are we going to do something that's going to mess up the marriage? That's the question of the Gemara. Reb Beryl.
there's one more thing to consider. If the child dies by accident.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair. But that's not the subject of our Gemara, but that's a good point.
Quick question.
Mark, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Well, in my defense, you cut me off, but I cut you off.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, basically, here we're saying that if the child lives less than 30 days, it's questionable.
Right.
So once if the child has died already, I thought once they had a child, even if it's, if it died within 30 days, then it would be not considered being, that would be considered a stillborn.
Right.
So once
right.
Quick question, Rabbi.
Well, I'm saying just one thing. So, Mark, this exactly highlights what I've been saying all along, which is that Nephel we translate as stillborn, but in Judaism, just like a stillborn was viable through a certain point of pregnancy and then stopped, in Judaism, the stillborn, because it's not really the word stillborn, the stillborn is like still in a kind of state of pregnancy, in a certain sense for 30 days. Dr. Hammer, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question, not to the main issue, but if I heard correctly before, it said something, if she's married to an Israelite, and then Rashi talked about a Kohen. There's a tribe called Levi.
Yes.
Are they included in the Israelites, or what's the story there?
Dr. Hammer, I think I know why you're asking that question. It's a good question.
But
Right.
the Kohen can't marry.
My grandfather had the same question.
But the issue is the Kohen can't marry. Chalitza.
Exactly. So in this context, we're talking about a limited restriction that applies to a Kohen. Believe me, the Leviim aren't looking for more problems. So, you don't, I mean, more restrictions. In this case, it'll be complex. So the question basically is, can this woman, here's how I understand it, and I hope I'm getting it right. A woman loses her husband. Can she marry a Kohen? Husband passes away. Can she marry a Kohen? The answer is yes.
If she has children.
Unless you're a Karaite. No, regardless. Oh, okay, yeah. Let's say unless she has children. If a woman passes, or maybe the brother has no siblings, but whatever. Assuming there's no Yibam and Chalitza, woman is a widow. The woman is a widow. Can she marry a Kohen? Yes. However, can she marry Yisrael? Yes. What happens if the woman passes? I'm sorry, the husband passes, and now she needs to do either Yibum or Chalitza. So if she does Chalitza, can she marry a Kohen? That's the question.
It's always been after Chalitza or a Grusha can't marry Kohen.
So Chazal say that a Kohen cannot marry a Chalitza, because Chalitza is akin to marriage. So based on that knowledge, let's see the Gemara again, and let's see if we can figure it out. We'll read Rashi too. Itmar. A woman's baby, the only surviving child to her husband, Olav Hashalom passes. Again, compound tragedy. We could imagine what a devastating moment it is. But from the Gemara's perspective, we're talking about the dry, cold, dry halacha. What is to do? What is to happen? Well, what should happen is she should go through a chalitza ceremony. But what happens if she didn't know that she's supposed to do a chalitza ceremony? Because she didn't learn this Gemara, and she didn't know that if the baby doesn't survive 30 days, she is exempt from chalitza. And niskadsha, she has step one of kiddushin. She is betrothed. Avar Amar Ravina Mishmei Rava. She was not intimate. They did not have erusin. They did not move in together, but they have kiddushin. So Ravina says, here's what we do. Let's read Rashi. This is the only child. They should have been exempt. If the baby would have survived. She got married. She's an innocent woman. She's a good woman. On her dating profile on JSwipe or JNet or whatever you call it, she wrote that I am a widow, and therefore I can marry a kohen. And then there's a box that says, do you need to do chalitza? And she clicked the box that said we had a child together. Everything checks. But unfortunately, there needs to be a posek involved to ask the next question, which is how long did is that child still around? If not, when did that child pass? And so she made a mistake. We can't blame her. So here's the halacha. Im Eishes Yisraeli. If her first husband, if the new guy is a Yisrael, Rashi. Im Einoi Koyin Zes Sheniskachaloi Umutter Bechalutza. If the guy who's interested, who's keen in getting married, is a Yisrael, and the woman undergoing chalitza would not impact their marriage, so do the chalitza. Now, what kind of chalitza is this? Is this a full-fledged chalitza ceremony? Rashi says no. Choletzet minasafek. There is a doubt. And based on this doubt, we say, go ahead, do a chalitza misafek. Now you are the halachic status of a chalitza. And then maybe they have to re-betroth. Maybe they have to do another kiddushin misafek. And then all is good. But if the guy is a kohen, shim tachlois tehei asur aloi, and to do chalitza is to break up this marriage because the kohen can't marry a chalitza. Then samchin and other rabbanan. Then, for the purpose of this very complex scenario, will depend on the Chachamim, who have a more lenient view that say a baby does not need to wait 30 days to be considered viable. A baby is considered viable from birth. The Amrinon Lav Nefelu Ve'ena Chaletzes. And we say, you know what, this is not a nefel. We're not going to force this couple to go through chalitza. They can remain married as was. So, Ravina is teaching us a big chiddush in the name of Rava, which is, although generally speaking, we paskin like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, we say that you got to wait 30 days. And if not, the woman has to do chalitza. But this is not a chalitza vaday. This is a chalitza based on the suffix that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel tells us we need to be mindful of. But because Chazal are concerned about the plight of this married couple, we don't want to implode a already married couple. We're able to be soymech on the chachamim who say that this woman did not need to do chalitza because her son lived past the day, and according to the chachamim, that already makes her no longer need to be a chalitza. Now, here is the next question. The Gemara is going to also discuss further this idea. But let me ask you a question. Based on what we said, lo yolenu, a woman loses her husband and she's pregnant, and the baby lives till 29 days. And she did not get remarried. She did the right thing. She asked her rabbi. She clicked the extra box on the dating profile. And a big flag came up and said, you got to do chalitza. What if the lady says, I don't want to do chalitza. I want to do yibum. I want to marry my husband's brother. Can she marry your husband's brother? I don't believe so. Because it's only a suffix. We're not saying that they for sure have the din of yibum. It's a possibility that the child is a viable child. And it's possible that she does not have to do yibum. And therefore, I don't think we would allow such a person to get married to her husband's brother. Based on what we've said this far. I hope I'm not confusing anyone, but this is an interesting discussion. Again, two options, yibum, chalitza. The woman can either marry her husband's brother or do the chalitza, which is an elaborate ritual which separates her from her brother. But again, in a case where we're talking about a couple that already got remarried, we're going to be soymech on the kula.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rabbi.
So back to my problem with sensitivity. The lesson I'm learning is that a father to a son could be direct. When we're dealing at arm's length, we try to be sensitive.
Yeah. Let's see. The Gemara is not done. So Ravina quoted Rava as saying, we don't compel them to do chalitza if the guy is a kohen. Rav Sherevya mishmei Rav Amar. Rav Sherevya, who I haven't really heard a lot of in our Gemara, but it must be also a student of Rava, says no. Rava said differently. Achazu ve'achazu cheletzes. Both, if there was a kiddushin to a Yisrael, and if there was a kiddushin to a kohen, cheletzes, she undergoes chalitza, and I think the husband, the kohen, is told to go back onto J-Swipe or J-Date and find himself another wife who is permitted to him. Again, there's a lot of emotional tragedy in these stories. The lady lost her husband. She finally finds the sweetest kohen, and they're ready to get married, and all their values align. But Allah says that this is not for you. It's a very painful event. Now you might say, Rabbi, this is so cruel. How could Allah be so cruel? So I'll give you a good analog to help us appreciate this story. It makes me think of the tragedy of a couple who fall in love, and then they decide to do genetic testing, and they discover that they are both carriers for a devastating disease, and they both want to get married, or they don't. It's a time, let's say, that birth control doesn't even exist, so that's not an option. And so they are certain to bring, so that's a terribly tough question to decide. I wouldn't make the decision for them, but probably the best thing would be for them to not get married and bring children into the world to undergo suffering and illness. And so it's not fair, but sometimes fairness is not the only equation. Sometimes we're called upon to make more difficult decisions. So I hope that's a fair analogy. I hope it's not insensitive, but just to bring some understanding to this, at least how I understand it.
It actually makes it worse because not only did she lose her husband, she lost her baby.
Exactly. I'm saying
And
it's a
then
terribly, terribly painful, devastating situation. Amarli Ravina Rav Sheva. Ravina pushes back to Rav Sheva. He says, "Oh yeah, whose version are we going to accept? Not yours," says Ravina. You're going to accept mine. Initially, Rava said the more strict perspective. You do chalitza, I don't care what. Litzafra in the evening, Hadarbe. He retracted his position. Amar le Shrisuha. Should we allow a couple to be married if the woman did not experience chalitza? Yehrava, the Tishro, Tarba. Wow, this is like a real rabbinic curse. May it be God's will that for permitting that which mustn't be permitted, you're going to permit unkosher fats. Rashi. You're going to end up allowing somebody to eat something that is utterly not kosher. So you could see they must have had a very strong and contentious relationship. Have you ever heard such an insult before? Let's see if we can get some insight on this. Excuse me. So here's a sefer pre tzaddik. Let's see if he talks about this. He's talking about the theme of tshuva. I don't know. This is interesting. This Gemara deserves more inquiry, but I see we're already over time and we're starting to go over. Thank you for your indulgence. Just give me another second. I want to see if we can get some comment on this. This is a strong statement. Anyways, it looks like the facts are on Ravina's side, but nonetheless, Rav Shrevia was unhappy with his expressing such a lenient perspective, and he felt that trouble could come from this. And maybe he was saying, I hope you're going to make such a mistake that's going to be so utterly obvious that you made a mistake that people won't rely on you for this psak either, and therefore you won't have what he considers to be illicit marriages. Suffice it to say, I would say today's Gemara, an interesting Gemara, thought-provoking topics of discussion, emotionally fraught to consider what the subjects who, God forbid, might actually have to contend with these questions are going with, and ending off with an all-time rabbinic insult. My dear friends, and probing some manuscripts while we're at it. Dear friends, thank you so much for coming along for the ride. I look forward to continuing to study tomorrow. Hashem should bless everyone with good health and koyach. And thank you. And Dr. Hammer, Yashikaya, for asking about the morning, because you predicted today's Gemara too. You only have good news. May all of these subjects be entirely hypothetical and theoretical, and only bracha for all of Klal Yisrael.
Rabbi, you never got back to me.
About?
Yesterday, about the Sukkot. How was it? Talk to us. Tell us how it was.
You got to remind me at like 10:28.
Oh.
It was fantastic. There were hundreds of people. The police estimate that there were around 300 people came to celebrate Simchas Torah. The first night of Sukkot, we had 200 people. It
Toys?
was in the Guinness Book of World Record for maximum joy expressed in a single religious site, besides for in Jerusalem. And I'm sorry you weren't there. Actually, we had a smaller than usual Syrian crowd. And one last highlight, Chassan Brachus sold. There was an auction for the Kibbudim on Simchas Torah, actually on some other days of Sukkot too. Chassan Brachus went for $10,000, a record
What?
for our shul, Baruch Hashem.
Wow.
And Hashem should bless those who are involved, and Hashem should bless the shul. Maybe others should be similarly
Amen.
inspired. Actually, Eli, I give you a bracha. Next year, such big parnasa this year, you'll be bidding. You'll bidding up after 10,000 for Chassan Brachus. Deal?
10,001. You got it.
Oh, okay. Baruch Hashem. I could tell you that your standby, Rabbi Shalom will be studying.
And
Chumash.
you have to add add US dollars for us Canadians, not to make a mistake.
The curry, yes, the currency.
You know what? We'll take
you're right.
Canadian too. All right, gentlemen. Yasher Shayach.
Yasher Korach. Thank you.